When the avian Kalen intercepted a stray subspace frequency and screamed into the void for salvation, they believed they were hailing the Galactic Concordate's shining armada. They certainly didn't expect us. We were no elegant, enlightened saviors, just a battered patrol fleet of ironclads held together by spite, duct tape, and a terrifyingly high tolerance for violence. Amidst the grease and the rattling hum of a dying fusion reactor, the universe was about to learn exactly what a Deathworlder is. Coffee on the Aegis always tasted like scorched copper and regret. Arturo stared at the sludge in his chipped ceramic mug, watching the black liquid vibrate in time with the rhythmic, deep tissue shudder of the ship's engines. His lower back ached, a sharp, pinching pain that had been his constant companion since the drop shock over Titan 3 years ago. He shifted in his command chair, the synthetic leather squeaking in protest, and rubbed a calloused thumb across his bloodshot eyes. "Turner," Arturo rasped, his voice sounding like dry gravel. "Tell engineering if they don't sync the port stabilizers, I'm going to go down there and feed the chief to the plasma manifold." David Turner didn't look up from his tactical console. He just tapped a few keys, the blue light from the monitors washing over his pale, exhausted face. "Already told them, Cap. Chief says the stabilizers are synced. It's the hull that's warped." Arturo grunted. Typical. The Aegis was a retrofitted mining dreadnought, repurposed by the United Earth Navy when the defense budget dried up. It was ugly, shaped like a bruised brick, and smelled perpetually of recycled air, stale sweat, and aerosolized hydraulic fluid. They were currently drifting through Sector 4, a patch of dead space so empty it made Arturo's teeth hurt just looking at the sensors. 3 weeks of patrol duty. 3 weeks of nothing but cosmic dust and crewmen getting on each other's nerves. Then, the console at the communications station shrieked. It wasn't a standard proximity ping or a fleet broadcast. It was a jagged, high-pitched wail that cut through the bridge's low murmurs like a scalpel. Arturo dropped his mug. The ceramic shattered against the steel deck plating, splashing cold, bitter coffee over his boots. But he didn't care. "Report!" Arturo snapped, sitting up straight. The pain in his back vanished beneath a sudden surge of adrenaline. Jenna Cole, the comms officer, had both hands pressed hard against her headset. Her eyes were wide, darting across the cascading lines of distorted data bleeding down her primary screen. "It's a wideband distress signal, Captain, but the encoding is a mess. It's not UEN. It's not even close to standard human telemetry." "Pirates?" Turner asked, his hands hovering over the weapons lock toggles. "No!" Jenna shook her head, frantically routing the signal through the ship's translation matrix. "It's too desperate for a decoy. The bandwidth is massive, eating up every frequency on the spectrum. They're broadcasting in the blind, bleeding data." "Put it on speakers. Let the AI chew on it," Arturo ordered, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The bridge speakers popped, hissed, and then filled the room with a chaotic cacophony. It sounded like tearing metal layered over the screech of a dying animal, punctuated by booming rhythmic thuds. It was physically uncomfortable to listen to. Arturo felt the hairs on his arms stand up. Beneath the static, there was a frantic, breathy cadence. A voice. "Matrix is getting a lock on the linguistic root," Jenna said, her fingers flying across the haptic interface. "It's concordate origin, maybe?" "Wait, translating now." The screeching faded, replaced by a flat, mechanized voice generated by the ship's computer, translating the raw emotion of the alien broadcaster into stark, unfeeling English. "Defense is broken. The swarm has breached the inner mantle. We are burning concordate command. If you hear this, the colony at Tyra 7 is lost. We beg for immediate evacuation of the non-combatants. They are butchering the hatchlings. Please. Is anyone out there? The light is dying. Please." The transmission cut out with a deafening crackle of static, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence on the bridge. Arturo stared at the main view screen, showing nothing but the empty, uncaring blackness of space. His stomach twisted. He swallowed hard, tasting the phantom copper of adrenaline in the back of his throat. "Tyra 7, Arturo said quietly. "Where the hell is that?" "Plotting the origin trajectory," Turner replied, his voice a little shaky. "It's outside our patrol zone, way outside. It's in the outer traverse, about 4 light years from our current position." 4 light years, Arturo muttered. He rubbed his jaw, feeling the rough stubble there. The Galactic Concordate was a massive coalition of alien species that humanity had only recently discovered. They were elegant, technologically superior, and polite, which meant they wanted absolutely nothing to do with the violent, volatile apes from Sol. The Concordat kept to their pristine core worlds. Humanity stayed in the dirty fringes. "Captain," Jenna said softly, "the signal bounce. It wasn't meant for us. The trajectory shows they aimed it at the Concordat relay network, but a solar flare from a nearby red dwarf refracted the signal. It skipped off the anomaly and hit our receivers." "They dialed 911 and got the local dive bar," Turner muttered, pulling up a tactical map of the region. "Cap, looking at this data, if they're relying on a Concordat response fleet from the core, they won't get there for at least 6 weeks. Concordat ships are built for comfort and slow-burn exploration, not rapid deployment." Arturo stood up, his boots crunching slightly on the broken ceramic from his mug. He walked over to the tactical display. Tier 7 was a small blue dot. Surrounding it, according to the trailing data from the SOS, was a massive, swirling cloud of red contacts. "Who is attacking them?" Arturo asked. "Unknown," Jenna replied. "The data packets refer to them as the swarm, biomechanical signatures, massive heat blooms. They're dropping orbital kinetic strikes on population centers. Cap, it's a slaughterhouse." Arturo looked down at his hands. They were trembling, just a fraction. He hated being a hero. Heroes ended up as frozen meat floating in the void. He was a cynical, tired old man leading a crew of rejects on a ship that belonged in a scrapyard. The smart play was to log the signal, forward it to Earth Command, and continue the patrol. It wasn't human space. It wasn't a human problem. But he could still hear the translation echoing in his skull. "They are butchering the hatchlings." Arturo thought of his daughter, living in the crowded arcologies of New Chicago. He thought of the pirate raid on the Olympus colony a decade ago, the smoke, the screaming, the absolute helplessness of waiting for a fleet that arrived too late. A cold, heavy knot formed in his gut. It wasn't heroism. It was a raw, primal offense at the idea of a predator having its way with the defenseless. "Helm," Arturo said, his voice dropping an octave, losing its gravel and finding a hard, iron edge. "Spool up the slip space drive." Turner turned around, his eyes wide. "Sir, that's outside our jurisdiction. Command will court-martial us." "Let them," Arturo snapped. "Send a tight beam to the rest of the patrol group. Tell the Vanguard, the Ironclad, and the Spitfire to form up on our coordinates. We are jumping to Tyra 7. "Captain," Jenna warned, "we don't know what we're jumping into. The telemetry suggests hundreds of enemy vessels." "Then we won't have to aim," Arturo said, walking back to his command chair and strapping in. The heavy restraints clicked into place across his chest. "Sound general quarters. Depressurize the non-essential decks. Load the main magnetic railguns with solid tungsten penetrators. Let's go introduce ourselves." The transition into slip space was never a smooth affair on the Aegis. Human FTL technology wasn't the graceful folding of dimensions the Concordat boasted about. It was the brute force tearing of reality, forcing a massive wedge of steel and fusion power through the bleeding wound of space-time. Klaxons howled through the cramped corridors. Red emergency lighting bathed the bridge in a bloody hue. Arturo gripped the armrests of his chair as the ship began to vibrate violently. The ambient temperature plummeted, our breath pluming in white clouds in the freezing air. The smell of burning ozone and stressed insulation poured from the ventilation shafts. "Drive at 90%, Turner yelled over the deafening roar of the engines. "Structural integrity holding, but Deck 4 is reporting microfractures in the bulkhead." "Seal it off," Arturo shouted back. "Hold the vector, 10 seconds to jump." His stomach dropped as gravity plating flickered and failed for a sickening 3 seconds. Dust motes and loose screws floated up past his face. Then the plating slammed back to life, dragging Arturo hard against his restraints. The view screen dissolved from starlight into a swirling, violent tunnel of violet and black. They had breached. For the next 2 hours, the Aegis hurled itself through the subspace corridor. Arturo didn't unbuckle. He watched the tactical feeds populate as the rest of his ragtag fleet checked in. 4 ships, a dreadnought, 2 heavy cruisers, and a fast attack destroyer against an unknown armada. It was suicide by any logical metric, but humans had never been particularly good at math when they were angry. "Cap," Jenna's voice cut through his thoughts. She had stripped off her jacket, a sheen of sweat on her forehead. "I've managed to clean up the tail end of the distress data, getting visual telemetry from Tyra 7's orbital defense grid before it went down. Put it on the secondary monitor." A grainy, static-laced image flickered to life. It was a planetary view, looking down at a world that should have been a vibrant green and blue. Instead, massive streaks of ugly, Bruised purple clouds obscured the continents. Orbiting the planet were the enemy. Arturo's breath caught. They didn't look like ships. They looked like massive, jagged shards of obsidian, bristling with organic, pulsing veins of glowing orange light. There were dozens of them, capital ships, flanked by thousands of smaller, darting fighters that moved with the synchronized, terrifying precision of a locust swarm. "Jesus," Turner whispered. Beneath the fleet, the planet was boiling. Massive, concentrated beams of plasma were raining down from the obsidian ships, striking the surface and expanding into terrifying blooms of fire. They weren't invading, they were exterminating. "They don't have shields," Turner observed, leaning closer to his console, his tactical mind overriding his fear. "Or at least, not energy barriers like the Concordat. Scanners show an incredibly dense ablative armor, biometallic. Can our rails punch through it?" Arturo asked. "Only one way to find out," Turner said with a grim smile. "Captain, we are 3 minutes from real space re-entry," the helmsman called out. Arturo unbuckled his restraints and stood up. His knees popped. He keyed the ship-wide intercom. "Listen up. This is the captain." His voice echoed through the metal bones of the ship, reaching the gunnery crews sweating in the dark, the engineers covered in grease, the Marines racking their rifles in the staging bays. "We are dropping into a hot zone. The people down there aren't human. We don't owe them a damn thing. But right now someone is kicking down their door and burning their house to the ground." He paused, letting the low hum of the ship fill the silence. "The galaxy thinks we're thugs. They think we're violent, unevolved apes from a death world that shouldn't be allowed out of its own system. Today, we're going to show them they're absolutely right. We are the monsters in the dark, and we're about to show these bastards what happens when you wake us up, weapons free on arrival. Give them hell." Arturo clicked off the intercom and strapped back in. "All ships, stagger your exit vectors. I don't want us dropping into a neat little line. Make it messy. 30 seconds, Turner counted down. The ship groaned, the metal screeching in protest as the FTL drive began to forcefully eject them back into real space. The violet tunnel outside the view screen began to collapse. 10, 9, Arturo tasted copper again. He gripped the armrests. 3, 2, 1, mark. The universe ripped open. The transition was violent. The Aegis slammed into real space with the force of a physical blow. The inertial dampeners whined in agony, and a shower of sparks rained down from a blown conduit above the science station. The smell of burning wire instantly filled the bridge. "Status!" Arturo roared over the ringing in his ears. "We are out! Real space confirmed!" Jenna yelled. "Vanguard, Ironclad and Spitfire have breached. Fleet is intact." Arturo looked at the main view screen. The reality of the slaughter hit him harder than the FTL drop. Tyra 7 hung in the void, half of its surface glowing an angry volcanic red, and standing between the human fleet and the planet was the swarm. Close up, the alien ships were terrifying. Massive, monolithic wedges of dark metal and pulsating organic matter, and the Aegis had dropped right on their flank. The swarm fleet didn't react immediately. They were positioned in a rigid, perfect orbital bombardment formation, pouring fire down onto the helpless Kalan cities. The sudden appearance of 4 ugly, jagged human ships seemed to cause a momentary lapse in their hive-mind logic. "They're scanning us," Jenna said, her hands flying over her board. "I'm detecting massive sensor sweeps hitting our hull. They're trying to figure out what we are." "Don't keep them in suspense," Arturo growled. "Turner, target the nearest capital ship. The big ugly one holding position over the northern hemisphere. Full spread. Fire. Firing. Humanity had never adopted energy weapons for ship-to-ship combat. Lasers dissipated. Plasma could be magnetically deflected. When humanity went to the stars, they brought the fundamental rule of the universe with them. If you throw a very heavy rock very, very fast, nothing can stop it. Beneath Arturo's feet, the ship violently shuddered as the twin, spinal-mounted magnetic railguns fired. The sound was a deep, bone-rattling thwump, instantly followed by the high-pitched shriek of capacitors draining. 2 massive slugs of depleted uranium, encased in tungsten, left the Aegis at a significant fraction of the speed of light. There were no glowing beams, no elegant light shows, just an invisible, instantaneous application of physics. On the view screen, the nearest obsidian dreadnought, a ship 3 times the size of the Aegis, suddenly jerked violently. The kinetic impact was devastating. The human slugs didn't try to burn through the biometallic armor. They simply shattered it with sheer, unstoppable momentum. The first slug punched a hole the size of a city block straight through the midsection of the alien vessel, ripping out the other side in a massive bloom of shattered armor, frozen atmosphere, and glowing green fluids. The second slug hit a split second later, striking whatever served as the ship's reactor core. The alien dreadnought didn't explode gracefully. It ruptured. A silent, blinding flash of white light consumed the vessel, tearing it into a million spinning fragments of shrapnel that instantly shredded the smaller escort fighters flying in formation around it. The bridge of the Aegis erupted into a fraction of a second of stunned silence, quickly broken by Turner's feral bark of laughter. "Splash 1 heavy! Target utterly destroyed!" Arturo didn't smile. He watched the tactical map. The red contacts, previously static, suddenly swarmed like a kicked anthill. The bombardment of the planet ceased immediately. Thousands of alien fighters wheeled around, breaking orbit, their orange, pulsating veins flaring brightly as they turned their attention to the 4 human ships. "Looks like we got their attention," Arturo muttered. "Evasive maneuvers, standard pattern Delta. Tell the Spitfire to start dropping proximity mines in our wake. Jenna, open a broadband channel to the planet's surface." "Channel open, Captain." Arturo leaned into his microphone. "Tyra 7, this is Captain Arturo Hayes of the United Earth Navy. We heard your distress call. Keep your heads down. We're going to clear the sky." Outside, the void erupted into chaos. The swarm, realizing they were facing an enemy that didn't play by the civilized rules of energy warfare, unleashed a torrent of plasma torpedoes. The space between the fleets lit up with blinding yellow streaks. "Incoming!" Turner shouted. "Brace!" Arturo commanded. The Aegis groaned as thrusters fired, throwing the massive ship into a clumsy but effective spin. Plasma bursts slammed into the ship's ablative armor plating. The hull rang like a massive iron bell. Searing heat bled through the bulkheads, making the bridge instantly feel like the inside of an oven. Sweat poured down Arturo's face, stinging his eyes. "Armor holding! Forward batteries returning fire!" From the flanks of the human cruisers, hundreds of missile pods opened. It wasn't precision fire. It was a chaotic, dirty barrage of high-explosive ordnance, leaving thick trails of grey exhaust in the vacuum. The missiles slammed into the incoming wave of swarm fighters. The void filled with dozens of expanding fireballs. It was ugly, brutal, and unrefined. It was everything the galaxy despised about humanity. Arturo watched a swarm fighter slip past the flak screen, diving straight for the Aegis's bridge. He could see the jagged insectoid mandibles on the ship's nose, the glowing orange core charging a plasma burst. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. At the last possible second, a stream of solid lead from the ship's point defense rotary cannons stitched across the void, ripping the alien fighter into shredded confetti before it could fire. Pieces of alien hull pinged off the Aegis's forward viewport like hail on a tin roof. Arturo wiped the sweat from his chin, his breathing slow and even despite the chaos threatening to tear his ship apart. The bloodshot exhaustion in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, predatory focus. Down on the surface of Tyra 7, amidst the rubble and the ash, the surviving Kalans stared up at their ruined sky. They had expected the pristine, glowing white ships of the Concordat to descend like angels. Instead, they watched in terrified awe as jagged blocks of scarred iron tore into their tormentors, spitting fire, smoke, and kinetic fury. They didn't know who these violent saviors were. They only knew that the monsters in the sky had finally met something far, far worse. The bridge of the Aegis smelled like a crematorium that had suffered an electrical fire. Acrid black smoke poured from the primary life support vents, stinging Arturo's eyes and leaving a greasy film on his teeth. He pressed a rag against his bleeding nose, the copper taste of his own blood mixing with the sulfurous air. The inertial dampeners were failing, meaning every hit the ship took translated directly to the crew. "Reroute power from Deck 7. I don't care if it's venting atmosphere. Let it vent," Arturo shouted, his voice cracking. He tossed the bloody rag onto the deck. Outside the viewport, the void was no longer black. It was a chaotic, strobing nightmare of orange plasma, expanding debris fields, and the grey, dirty streaks of human missile exhaust. The swarm had recovered from their initial shock. They didn't fight with the rigid, honorable formations of the Concordat. They fought like a fluid, a liquid wave of biomechanical hatred that adapted to the human kinetic weaponry with terrifying speed. They realized humanity didn't use energy shields, so they stopped trying to burn through the hulls with heavy plasma and started using their massive numbers to physically overwhelm the human vessels. "Captain!" Turner yelled, his hands a blur over the tactical console. A deep, ugly gash ran across his forehead where a loose console panel had caught him. "The ironclad is taking heavy fire. 3 enemy cruisers have locked onto a port thruster bank. Tell Briggs to angle his armored prow toward them and dump his flare pods. Jenna, Give me a fleet-wide status. Jenna didn't look up, her face illuminated by the harsh red emergency lighting. She routed the telemetry to the secondary screen. Vessel hull integrity, primary weapons core, temp status, Aegis 72%, railguns hot, 40% ammo, nominal engaged, taking minor hits. Vanguard 85%, missiles depleted, nominal providing flak cover for Spitfire. Ironclad 41%, forward batteries offline. Critical port engine compromised. Bleeding atmosphere. Spitfire 90% torpedoes tracking elevated hit-and-run screening. Arturo stared at the numbers. The Ironclad was dying. Its captain, Briggs, was a stubbornly aggressive fool, but he was their fool. Tell the Spitfire to cut a path, Arturo growled, gripping the edge of his command console until his knuckles turned white. Vanguard, form up on Ironclad's port side. Take the hits for her. Helm, bring us about. 040. Give me a firing solution on the cluster swarming Briggs. They're too close to the Ironclad, Cap, Turner shouted over the shrieking of an overworked cooling turbine. If we fire the main rails, the kinetic shockwave will shatter her remaining armor. We'll crack her in half. Arturo froze. He looked at the tactical map. He looked at the red contacts physically chewing on the Ironclad's hull. He was a cynical man, but watching his people get butchered brought a hot, shameful bile to his throat. He hated this. He hated being the one to do the math on who lived and who burned. Switch to high explosive flak, Arturo ordered, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. Set detonation proximity to 50 meters from Ironclad's hull. Turner hesitated. That'll scour her outer sensor arrays. It'll blind them. Blind is better than dead. Do it. The Aegis shuddered. The rotary cannons on her starboard flank spun up, vibrating the floorboards so violently, Arturo's teeth rattled. A solid wall of explosive shells tore into the vacuum, detonating just short of the Ironclad. The vacuum of space carried no sound, but on the tactical display, Arturo watched the swarm of alien fighters turn to dust in the explosive shockwave. Contact cleared, Jenna breathed, her voice trembling. Ironclad is blind but holding. Before Arturo could exhale, a violently loud metallic clang reverberated through the ship. It didn't sound like a weapons impact. It sounded like a massive rusted nail being hammered into a tin roof. The Aegis lurched starboard. What was that? Arturo snapped. Sensor ghost! Turner frantically hit his console. We have a massive biological mass attached to our lower hull. Deck 12. It slipped through the flak screen. Cap. It's not a fighter. It's a boarding pod. The bridge went dead silent, save for the hum of the failing turbines. Humans had long ago abandoned boarding actions. They were suicide. You breached a ship, you fought in the dark. And usually, everyone died when a stray bullet hit a plasma conduit. But the swarm wasn't human. They're burning through the outer hull, Jenna whispered, reading the telemetry. Atmospheric alarms on Deck 12. Deck 11. They're climbing. Arturo unholstered the heavy, blocky kinetic pistol from his hip, the cold grip a harsh anchor to reality. Seal the bulkheads. Vent the gravity from the lower decks, Arturo said, staring at the security feeds. And get me Sergeant Logan on the horn. Deck 10 was a labyrinth of exposed pipes, dripping condensation, and the heavy, throbbing arteries of the ship's primary coolant network. Sergeant David Logan crouched behind a reinforced steel pillar, the harsh beam of his helmet light cutting through the thick, oily smoke. Over the internal comms, the captain's voice was clipped, static-laced. Logan, you have multiple hostiles pushing up the central access shaft. Contain them. Do not let them reach the reactor. Copy that, Cap, Logan grunted. He clicked his comms off. He was a large man, stuffed into a scarred set of UN riot armor. It wasn't elegant powered armor like the Concordat theoretically possessed. It was thick ceramic plating bolted onto Kevlar mesh. It felt heavy. It smelled intensely of his own sour sweat and stale breath inside the helmet. He racked the slide of his combat shotgun. The heavy metallic clack echoed down the corridor. Listen up, apes, Logan said to the 6 Marines stacked up behind him. Gravity is off in the lower shaft. The ship is spinning. We're fighting in a washing machine. Check your mag boots. The squad tapped their boots against the deck plating. The magnetic locks engaged with heavy thuds. A sound drifted up from the darkness of the access shaft at the end of the hall. It wasn't footsteps. It sounded like wet razors scraping across a blackboard. A rapid, frantic clicking, accompanied by a foul, rotting smell that cut right through their helmet filters. It smelled like rancid meat and battery acid. Here they come, Private O'Connor whispered, his laser sight trembling slightly in the smoke. Hold the line. Let them funnel into the choke point, Logan ordered. From the darkness of the shaft, the swarm poured out. Logan felt his stomach twist. The telemetry data hadn't done them justice. They were roughly human-sized, but that was where the similarity ended. They were a grotesque amalgamation of jagged obsidian chitin and pulsing exposed muscle tissue. They had no eyes, just a smooth, domed carapace above a maw of snapping, multi-jointed mandibles. They moved with terrifying, erratic speed, scaling the walls and ceiling of the corridor, unaffected by the localized gravity shifts. "Light 'em up!" Logan roared. The corridor erupted. Human kinetic weapons were loud, deafeningly so, in a confined space. The muzzle flashes strobe-lit the hallway in harsh, blinding bursts of white and yellow. Logan fired his shotgun. The recoil slammed into his shoulder. A cloud of tungsten buckshot tore through the leading alien, shattering its carapace. Green, viscous fluid erupted from the wound, hissing violently as it hit the metal deck. Acid. But the creature didn't stop. It lost an arm and a leg, but it simply used its remaining limbs to launch itself forward, its mandibles clicking frantically. "They don't feel pain," O'Connor screamed, firing his assault rifle on full auto. The heavy rounds chewed through the aliens. But for every one that fell, 2 more crawled over its twitching corpse. An alien lunged from the ceiling, dropping directly onto a Marine named Vance. It didn't use a weapon. It used its own body, its jagged limbs pinning the Marine to the floor. The mandibles snapped shut, punching through the ceramic armor of his helmet like it was paper. Vance's scream was cut brutally short, replaced by the sickening sound of wet tearing. "Burn them!" Logan yelled, his vision narrowing. The logic of the universe faded, leaving only raw survivalist panic. "O'Connor, the flamer!" O'Connor stepped forward, his hands shaking as he squeezed the trigger of the underslung heavy flamer. A torrent of liquid burning napalm flooded the corridor. The heat was instantaneous and suffocating. The aliens' screaming wasn't vocal. It was a high-pitched venting of superheated gases from their carapaces. The smell of burning alien flesh, sweet, sickening, and chemical, filled the corridor. Logan watched as the flaming creatures kept crawling forward for several seconds before their biomechanisms finally melted down. They collapsed into twitching, smoldering heaps of ash and melted armor. The corridor fell silent save for the crackling of the napalm and Logan's own ragged breathing echoing in his helmet. He looked down at Vance. There was nothing left to save. He keyed his comms. His hand was trembling so hard he almost missed the button. "Bridge, this is Logan. Initial wave repelled. We lost one. They're Cap. They're like nothing I've ever seen. They don't stop." On the bridge, Arturo listened to Logan's shaky voice. He stared at his tactical console. The ship was bleeding. His people were dying in the dark to save a species they hadn't even met yet. A deep, heavy exhaustion settled into his bones. "Hold the line, Logan," Arturo said quietly. "Keep them away from engineering. We're almost done up here." Arturo cut the channel. He didn't know if he was lying. He looked out at the orbital battlefield. The Aegis and her fleet had managed to draw the bulk of the swarm ships into a messy, close-quarters brawl. The void was littered with the wreckage of obsidian ships and thousands of frozen, shattered alien bodies. The blockade above the planet had fractured. There was a window. "Jenna," Arturo said, staring at the burning blue jewel of Tyra 7. "The planet's surface. Do we have any Kalan survivors left down there?" Jenna's fingers flew across her console. "Yes, Captain. I'm tracking a massive thermal cluster in the southern hemisphere, a fortified bunker complex. But the swarm has landed ground forces. They're cutting through the bunker doors. The Kalan won't last another hour." Arturo closed his eyes for a long second. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. The smart play was to stay in orbit, fight their way out, and jump back to human space. "Turner," Arturo said, his eyes opening. They were cold, dead. "Prep the dropships. Tell Logan to leave a skeleton crew to guard the reactor. Pull the rest of the Marines to the launch bays. We're going down." "Captain?" Turner asked, stunned. "We're taking a beating up here. If we deploy the Marines, the ship is practically defenseless against boarding." "If we don't go down there," Arturo replied, his voice devoid of emotion, "all those people die. And we came out here to kill monsters. So let's go kill monsters." The atmospheric entry of a UN heavily armored dropship was not a gentle glide. It was a controlled fall. Inside the cramped, vibrating troop bay of Victor Actual, Sergeant Logan gripped the overhead restraint bar until his joints ached. The dropship rattled so violently he couldn't focus his eyes on the Marine sitting across from him. The heat shielding beneath their boots screamed against the friction of Tyra 7's atmosphere, turning the metal floor uncomfortably warm. The smell of vomit and fear hung thick in the air. 2 Marines had already lost their lunch. Logan didn't blame them. Dropping onto an alien world through a sky choked with debris and hostile plasma fire was enough to break anyone's nerve. 30 seconds to drop, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Flak is heavy. Brace." The ship violently jerked to the left, tossing the Marines against their harnesses. A muffled explosion rocked the hull. Logan gritted his teeth, feeling the deep, familiar ache in his lower back. "Listen up!" Logan yelled over the roaring engines, slamming a fresh drum magazine into his shotgun. "The Kaelin are non-combatants. The brief says they're fragile, avian biology, hollow bones. Do not step on them. You shoot anything with a carapace. You shield anything with feathers. Am I clear?" "Hoorah!" the squad mumbled back, their voices tight. The ship suddenly decelerated, the sudden G-force pressing them hard into their seats. The ramp at the back of the dropship dropped with a heavy, hydraulic hiss. Tyra 7 rushed in. The sky wasn't blue. It was a bruised, choking violet, thick with swirling ash and the ugly black smoke of burning cities. The dropship hovered 10 feet above a ruined plaza constructed of elegant, sweeping white stone that had been shattered and scorched. "Go! Go! Go!" Logan roared. The Marines unclipped and poured out of the dropship, hitting the ground with heavy thuds. Their magnetic boots crushed the delicate stone beneath them. They fanned out, forming a defensive perimeter around the drop zone. The air outside smelled like a chemical plant explosion, a sharp, stinging mix of ozone, burning plastic, and the rotting meat stench of the swarm. Logan checked his HUD. The waypoint for the Kaelin bunker was 200 meters to their north, situated beneath the ruins of what looked like a massive glass-domed cathedral. "Push up," Logan ordered, waving his arm. They moved through the ruins, their heavy armor clanking. The contrast was jarring. This world had clearly been a place of pristine beauty, all curved lines and delicate architecture, designed by a species that valued art. Now it was being stomped on by blocky, dirty human soldiers, built for nothing but violence. As they approached the cathedral ruins, the sound of the swarm reached them, the scraping, clicking cacophony. "Contact front!" O'Connor yelled. Hundreds of the swarm creatures were swarming over massive blast shield doors set into the ground. They were using organic, acid-spitting appendages to melt the metal. "Engage!" The Marines opened fire. The deafening roar of assault rifles, heavy machine guns, and shotguns shattered the heavy air. The swarm, unprepared for an attack from the rear, turned in unison. The battle was brief and exceptionally brutal. In the open, the humans had the advantage of range and overwhelming kinetic firepower. The heavy tungsten rounds shredded the aliens, turning the elegant plaza into a slaughterhouse of green acid and shattered chitin. Logan pushed forward, his shotgun kicking rhythmically as he cleared a path to the melted bunker doors. He stepped over a twitching alien corpse, crushing its skull beneath his heavy boot without a second thought. "Clear!" O'Connor shouted, his rifle smoking. Logan walked up to the massive, half-melted doors. He slammed his fist against the metal. It rang dully. "Hey!" Logan yelled, his voice carrying through his external helmet speakers. "United Earth Navy! Open up! We're here to get you out!" For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of burning rubble and the distant rolling thunder of orbital strikes in the sky. Then a loud, grinding noise echoed from within. The massive doors slowly, agonizingly parted, groaning on warped tracks. The interior of the bunker was dark, lit only by dim, flickering emergency lights. Logan stepped inside, raising his weapon slightly, his helmet light cutting through the gloom. Huddled in the massive subterranean space were thousands of them. The Kaelin. They were tall, incredibly slender, and entirely covered in soft, iridescent feathers that shifted between silver and pale blue. They had large, expressive eyes that were currently wide with absolute, unadulterated terror. They looked like angels that had been dragged through the mud. A figure stepped forward from the trembling crowd. It was an older Kaelin, wearing a tattered ceremonial robe. He moved with a fragile, bird-like grace, his thin legs trembling. He looked up at Logan. To the Kaelin, Logan must have looked like a nightmare, a massive, hulking golem of scarred metal, covered in soot, carrying a weapon that reeked of smoke and death. The humans weren't the glowing saviors of the Concordat. They were the apex predators from a death world. The old Kaelin looked at the dead swarm monsters outside, then back up to the towering human. "You," the Kaelin spoke, its voice a melodic, trilling sound that the translation matrix in Logan's helmet converted into English. "You answered the call?" Logan didn't smile. He didn't offer a platitude. He just reached up, unlocked his helmet, and pulled it off, taking a deep breath of the filtered bunker air. He looked at the trembling alien, his eyes bloodshot, his face covered in sweat and grease. "Yeah," Logan grunted, his voice rough. "We answered. Now get your people moving. Our ships are taking a beating up there, and we're leaving in 5. Dust filtered down from the cracked ceiling of the bunker, catching the pale, flickering emergency lights. Logan stood perfectly still, his heavy armor hissing softly as the internal cooling systems struggled to regulate his body temperature. He watched the Kalan. They were huddled together, a shifting sea of iridescent feathers and wide, terrified eyes. They looked at the massive human dropships parked outside the melted doors, and then they looked at Logan. They weren't moving. "We don't have time for a meet and greet," Logan muttered, switching his comms back to the external speakers. "Everyone, move towards the ramps, now." The Kalan elder, the one in the tattered robes, flitted his hands nervously. "The vessels, they are machines of war. They smell of burning and death. We are not conditioned for such environments." Logan stepped forward. The elder flinched, shrinking back. Logan stopped, realizing the sheer mechanical intimidation of his blood-spattered, soot-stained armor. He sighed, a heavy, rattling sound inside his chest. He reached out, moving slower this time, and gently placed a massive, armored hand on the elder's delicate shoulder. It felt like holding a bird with hollow bones. Logan was terrified he might accidentally crush the alien if he applied even an ounce of pressure. "Listen to me," Logan said, keeping his voice as flat and calm as possible. "You're right. My ship is a flying brick. It smells like sweat, hydraulic fluid, and fear. It shakes, it rattles. It's going to be the most uncomfortable ride of your life. But if you stay here, those things outside are going to eat you alive. Choose." The elder stared at the dull, scratched visor of Logan's helmet resting under his arm, then looked at the dead, twitching swarm monsters littering the plaza. The alien swallowed hard, his throat feathers ruffling. He turned to his people and let out a series of high-pitched melodic trills. Slowly, the Kalan began to move. It was a chaotic, miserable boarding process. The humans had to physically guide the terrified aliens into the dark, cramped troop bays of the dropships. The Kalan hyperventilated, their chest cavities expanding rapidly in the stale, recycled air of the transports. They huddled on the hard metal deck plates, clutching each other, their soft feathers a stark, absurd contrast to the grey, heavily bolted bulkheads. "Load, master! How are we looking?" Logan shouted over the whine of the repulsor lifts. "Packed like sardines, Sergeant," O'Connor yelled back, securing the heavy cargo straps over a cluster of shaking Kalan. "We've got maybe 2,000 across the four birds. That's everyone left in the bunker. Ramps up! Get us out of here!" The heavy metal ramps slammed shut, plunging the troop bays into dim red combat lighting. Several of the Kalan let out soft, panicked cries. Logan grabbed onto the overhead restraint bar. He didn't offer them comforting words. He just braced his legs. "Hold on to something," Logan barked. "This is going to suck." The dropships shot upward, tearing through the bruised violet sky. The G-force was brutal. Logan watched one of the Kalan practically collapse under the pressure, their fragile bones groaning against the strain of rapid acceleration. The human pilots weren't flying for comfort, they were flying to survive. In orbit, the situation had deteriorated from a brawl into a meat grinder. Arturo gripped his command chair, blood dripping slowly from his nose onto his soiled uniform. The Aegis was groaning, a deep, structural agony that vibrated up through the deck plating and into Arturo's boots. The tactical display was a mess of red. "Dropships have broken Atmo," Jenna reported, her voice hoarse. "They're on approach vector. Give them covering fire," Arturo rasped. "Turner, where is the ironclad?" "She's dead in the water, Cap," Turner replied, his hands frantically rerouting power to the failing point defense cannons. "Port engine is gone. Main reactor is bleeding radiation. Briggs is venting atmosphere just to keep the fires from reaching the magazines." Arturo looked at the secondary screen. The ironclad was barely recognizable. Its jagged, brutalist hull was scored with massive, glowing craters of melted armor. Swarm fighters were crawling all over it, tearing at the hull plating like ants dismantling a dying beetle. "Briggs," Arturo said, opening a direct channel. "Status." Static hissed, followed by the heavy, wet sound of a man coughing up blood. "Cap, we're done. Gravity is offline. Life support is gone. I've got maybe 40 crew left, sealed in the CIC. The bugs are cutting through the blast doors." Arturo's jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck strained. He hated this math. "I'm sending the Spitfire to pull you out." "Negative," Briggs wheezed, a dark, cynical chuckle bleeding through the comms. "Spitfire gets close. She gets swarmed too. You know the math, Arturo. Don't be stupid." "Briggs, the dropships are docking," Briggs interrupted. "I can see them on the sensors. You've got the birds, Cap. Now you need to get them the hell out of here. But the swarm is tethering your FTL drives with localized gravity nets. You can't jump while they're this thick." Arturo knew what was coming. He hated it. He hated the cold, uncaring void that constantly demanded blood. "Don't do it, Thomas. I'm overriding the core safeties," Briggs said, his voice remarkably steady. "I'm going to overload the fusion reactor. When she blows, It'll create a localized EMP and a kinetic shockwave big enough to scatter the swarm's gravity nets. You'll have a 10-second window to jump. The bridge of the Aegis fell utterly silent, except for the blaring of alarms. Jenna covered her mouth. Turner stared at his console, unblinking. "Thomas," Arturo said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "It's been an honor. Give 'em hell, Arturo, and get those birds home." The channel cut to static. "Dropships are locked and secured in the lower bays," Jenna yelled, breaking the heavy silence. "Helm," Arturo ordered, locking his eyes on the forward view screen. "Spool the slip-space drive. Match the jump sequence to the ironclad's core detonation. Drive spooling. Structural integrity is at 30% cap. We might not survive the jump. We definitely won't survive staying here. Do it." Arturo watched the dying bulk of the ironclad. It was a stubborn, ugly ship. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, the center of the vessel began to glow. It wasn't the bright, elegant flash of an energy weapon. It was a dirty, blinding, radioactive white light. The ironclad didn't explode. It ruptured reality. The fusion core went critical, unleashing the furious, contained power of a miniature star directly into the void. The shockwave was invisible, but its effects were catastrophic. The swarm of obsidian alien ships clinging to the ironclad were instantly vaporized. The wave expanded outward, a massive, crushing wall of kinetic force that shattered the swarm's formations, throwing their capital ships into chaotic, spinning spirals. "Gravity nets are down!" Turner screamed. "Spitfire and Vanguard are away! Jump!" Arturo roared. The Aegis screamed. The ship threw itself violently into the tear in space-time, riding the bleeding edge of the radioactive shockwave. The universe twisted, colors inverted, and the sheer mechanical stress of the transition blew out the remaining light bulbs on the bridge. Sparks rained down in the dark. The ship shuddered, violently tossing Arturo against his restraints. And then there was only the smooth, terrifying silence of slipspace. They had escaped. Slipspace was never peaceful, but compared to the furious slaughter over Tyra 7, the violent, vibrating purple tunnel outside the viewports felt like a sanctuary. Arturo unbuckled his restraints. He didn't stand up immediately. He just sat there in the dim, red emergency lighting, his hands resting on his knees, breathing in the smell of scorched wiring, sweat, and ozone. His body ached. A deep, throbbing migraine had settled behind his eyes, a phantom pressure threatening to split his skull. "Damage report," Arturo said, his voice sounding thin and hollow in the gloom. Turner was wiping blood off his console with his sleeve. "We're holding together, Cap. Barely. Main rail guns are warped. Port armor is entirely gone. We've got raw structural framing exposed to the void. Medical bay it's overwhelmed. The Kalen? Logan managed to pack them into the lower cargo holds. Environmental controls are struggling to keep the oxygen mix stable for them. They're terrified, but they're alive." Arturo slowly pushed himself to his feet. His knees popped loudly in the quiet bridge. "Jenna, keep us on vector. We drop into concordate space at the border of Sector 9. Let them deal with the refugees. Turner, you have the con. I'm going down to the holds." The walk from the bridge to the lower decks was a tour through a dying mechanical beast. Bulkheads were scorched and warped. Engineering crews rushed past Arturo, their faces smeared with grease and exhaustion, carrying heavy welding torches and emergency patching kits. The gravity plating flickered randomly, causing Arturo to stumble more than once. Nobody saluted him. There was no energy left for military protocol. They just gave him tired, hollow nods. When he reached cargo hold 4, the smell hit him first. It was an overpowering scent of fear, a sharp, chemical musk emanating from the Kalen, mixed with the coppery tang of human blood from the wounded Marines being triaged in the corners. Arturo stepped through the heavy blast doors. The massive, cavernous room was a sea of feathers. The Kalen were huddled in large, tight circles on the cold steel floor. The dim lighting caught the iridescent shimmer of their plumage. They were murmuring to each other in low, musical trills that sounded like a morning song. As Arturo walked among them, the aliens parted, pulling their fragile bodies away from him. They looked at him with absolute, unadulterated awe and deep-seated fear. To them, he was a monster. He was covered in soot, his uniform torn, blood caked on his jaw. He moved with a heavy, predatory clumsiness, his boots clanking against the deck. He wasn't a glowing, elegant savior. He was a creature of violence. Sergeant Logan was standing near a stack of supply crates, his helmet off, drinking water from a metal canteen. His armor was scored with deep, melting gouges from the swarm's acid. "Captain," Logan nodded, lowering the canteen. "How many, Sergeant?" Arturo asked, stopping beside him. 2,000, give or take. We lost 4 Marines in the bunker defense, 8 more in the orbital breach." Logan looked out over the sea of aliens. "They don't eat our food. They don't drink our water. They're just sitting there, shaking. Before Arturo could reply, the crowd of Kalen near them shifted. The elder, the same one Logan had spoken to on the planet, stepped forward. He moved slowly, his thin, digitigrade legs trembling with every step. He approached Arturo, his large, expressive eyes locking onto the human captain's bloodshot gaze. The elder bowed his head slightly. The translation matrix embedded in the ship's comm system picked up his musical voice, projecting a flat, synthesized English translation from the overhead speakers. "You are the leader of this pack," the elder said. It wasn't a question. "I am the captain of this vessel," Arturo corrected him, his voice rough. "Arturo Hayes, United Earth Navy." The elder tilted his head, studying Arturo's battered face. "You bleed. Your ship groans like a dying beast. You are not of the Concordat. Their ships do not bleed. Their ships are light and glass. We're human," Arturo said simply. He crossed his arms over his chest, feeling a sharp twinge in his ribs. "The Concordat doesn't like us very much. They think we're barbaric, and they're probably right." "We sent our plea to the light," the elder continued, his voice trembling slightly. "We begged the Concordat for salvation. We expected angels to descend from the sky and banish the swarm with shining fire." "Sorry to disappoint," Arturo muttered, his cynical edge bleeding through. "You got a bunch of apes with kinetic slugs and bad attitudes instead." The elder took a step closer, close enough that Arturo could see the intricate, delicate patterns in his silver feathers. "When the swarm came, the Concordat patrol ships fled. They said the statistical probability of victory was too low. They abandoned us to the dark." Arturo didn't say anything. He knew how the Concordat fought. They fought with math. If they couldn't win gracefully, they didn't fight at all. "You did not flee," the elder said softly. "You threw your iron against the dark. You shattered your own vessels to shield us. You are completely devoid of elegance." "Elegance doesn't stop armor-piercing rounds," Arturo grunted. "And elegance, sure as hell, doesn't win a knife fight in the dark. We saw a bully kicking down someone's door. Where we come from, you don't stand by and calculate the odds. You pick up a rock and you cave the bastard's head in." The elder reached out a frail, three-fingered hand. He hesitated, then gently touched the scorched, blood-stained fabric of Arturo's sleeve. "We asked the universe for angels," the Kalen elder whispered, his large eyes shimmering with an emotion Arturo couldn't quite place. "The universe, in its infinite wisdom, sent us wolves. For that, we are eternally in your debt." Arturo looked at the frail alien hand on his arm. He didn't feel like a wolf. He felt old, tired, and deeply sad for the men and women currently turning into frozen dust over Tier 7. "Don't thank us yet," Arturo said, stepping back slightly. "We still have to drop you off. Get some rest. It's a long way to the border." The transition back to real space was accompanied by the sound of failing hydraulics. The Aegis, flanked by the heavily damaged Vanguard and the relatively intact Spitfire, dropped out of slip space on the absolute edge of Sector 9, the Concordat border. They didn't arrive gracefully. The Aegis vented a massive cloud of superheated plasma from a ruptured exhaust manifold the moment she hit the vacuum, spinning sluggishly before the stabilizing thrusters forcefully arrested her momentum. "Real space confirmed," Jenna announced on the bridge, her voice barely a whisper. She looked exhausted. Scanners are clear. No swarm pursuit." Arturo slumped back in his chair. He closed his eyes for a long, quiet minute. The heavy, rhythmic vibration of the ship was gone, replaced by a terrifying, stuttering hum. They had survived, but the Aegis would likely never see active service again. She was a flying scrap heap. "Sensors are picking up multiple heavy energy signatures dead ahead," Turner reported. "Concordat fleet. Looks like an intercept task force. 5 heavy cruisers, 2 dreadnoughts." Arturo opened his eyes. On the main view screen, the sleek, glowing white and gold vessels of the Galactic Concordat hung in the void. They were beautiful, flawless. They possessed no visible weapon batteries, no jagged armor plating. They looked like art pieces drifting in the dark. "They're hailing us," Jenna said. "Put them on." A face appeared on the secondary screen. It was a tall, elegant alien of the Seraph caste, the ruling species of the Concordat. They possessed pale, luminous skin, completely hairless, with eyes that glowed a soft, judgmental blue. "Unidentified Deathworlder vessels," the Seraph spoke, its tone dripping with a polite, manufactured condescension. "You have crossed into restricted Concordat space. Power down your crude propulsion systems immediately or face pacification." Arturo stared at the screen. He felt a hot, bubbling anger rise in his chest, cutting through the thick layer of exhaustion. He leaned forward, his face coming into full view of the Concordat commander. Arturo looked like hell. His eyes were entirely bloodshot. A nasty bruise was forming across his cheekbone, and his uniform was stained with soot and gore. "This is Captain Arturo Hayes of the United Earth Navy," Arturo growled, his voice rasping like sandpaper. "We don't have the fuel to power down, and if you shoot at us, I guarantee you we will throw enough depleted uranium into your pristine hulls to make you regret waking up this morning." The Seraph's perfectly sculpted brow furrowed in disgust. "Your hostility is typical of your kind, human. Why are you bleeding your toxic exhaust over our border?" "Because we brought you a present," Arturo said coldly. He tapped a command onto his console. "Jenna, transmit the logs, all of them. The distress call, the orbital telemetry over Tyra 7, and the internal hull footage of the Kalan refugees we have stuffed in our cargo bays." "Tyra 7? The Seraph's eyes widened slightly, a crack in its perfect composure. That sector was overrun by the swarm anomaly. The casualty projections were absolute. There are no survivors. "Your projections were wrong, because you ran," Arturo spat. "We didn't. We have 2,000 Kalan non-combatants aboard. They are traumatized, starving, and they need immediate medical evacuation." The Concordat commander looked off-screen for a moment, likely reviewing the massive data dump Jenna had just initiated. When the Seraph looked back, the disgust was gone, replaced by a profound, uncomfortable shock. You engaged a swarm armada? With kinetic weaponry? Your vessel? The structural damage is catastrophic. You lost a ship. We lost a lot of good people," Arturo corrected him, his voice devoid of any boastfulness. It was just a heavy, tragic fact. "Now, send your medical shuttles over. And Commander," "Yes, Captain? Tell your boarding crews to wipe their feet before they step on my deck. We just cleaned up." Arturo cut the channel before the alien could respond. He sat back, staring at the glowing, perfect ships outside his cracked viewport. Humanity wasn't pretty. They were loud, violent, and flawed. They held grudges. They fought dirty. But as he listened to the distant musical trills of the Kalan echoing up through the ventilation shafts, Arturo realized something. When the dark came knocking, nobody wanted a statistician. Nobody wanted a philosopher in a glowing glass ship. They wanted the monsters who knew how to hit back. "Turner," Arturo mumbled, rubbing his temples. "Go to the mess hall. See if the percolator survived the jump. I need a coffee. It'll taste like engine runoff and battery acid cap." "Perfect," Arturo said, closing his eyes again. "Just the way I like it. If you love this deep dive into the gritty, unbreakable spirit of humanity, hit that like button to feed the algorithm. We want to hear your thoughts. Would you rather have the elegant Concordat or the brutal United Earth Navy coming to your rescue? Drop your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow sci-fi lovers to help our channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another HFY story. Keep your railguns loaded, and we'll see you in the next one.